Welcome back to another episode of the Mainly Hoops podcast. We're back with another Big Ten team preview here. We've got the Iowa Hawkeyes under first year head coach Ben McCollum coming over from Drake. Before we do dive in, if you have been enjoying our off-season content, please go ahead and like and subscribe. We do appreciate everyone's support. But looking at this Iowa offense, talking strengths first here, Cody, what do you see for strengths here?
Yeah, I think it's an improvement from like last year's Drake team over an actual strength, but like Bennett Sturts and Ben McCollum operating with more talent around them, I think is something I'm very interested to see. It's Drake finished 69th in adjusted offense last season with very limited talent. It was just Bennett Sturts ball screen after ball screen, and you know if the shot clock got down to 5 or less seconds, like he was going to throw up a shot and he was going to make it very often. Like he was so efficient with, the lack of talent around him. I thought it was pretty impressive. And now, he gets to play around much better talent and guys like Alvaro Falgaris and Brennan Hausen and Cooper Koch as a shooter. And, they brought in Manyao and Banks to clean up on the offensive glass. So I think it's a much more talented group, and they could just add more elements to this offense now. I think like Fulgaris, like you can operate with him through the post as a scorer and a passer. He's a little bit volatile as a playmaker. He'll throw the ball away and like he'll get baited into some stuff against some defenses when he sees a different look. But I think one really important aspect of his game is his pick and pop ability with Bennett Sturts. Sturts didn't have a guy like this last year. He was running pick and roll with Cam Manyao and Tavion Banks, who were really just guys looking to score at the rim. But when you add that pick and pop threat, I think it's going to open up his game, and it's going to open up Fulgaris's game. And Fulgaris, for a front court player, is one of the more elite catch and shoot guys when it comes to quickness. And he was very efficient last year as well. He shot it, 40% from three last season. It was pretty impressive. And then Brendan Hausen, I kind of viewed it as he's going to be taking on like the Mitch Muscari role, but he's only a little bit better and he has a quicker trigger, deeper range. And I just think overall he's just a more talented player. That's not a knock at Muscari. I just think Hausen's a super talented shooter. And then guys like I mentioned Koch, who was a 4-star last year, and McCollum was able to keep him at Iowa. He's a plus shooter. We didn't see much of him. Another piece to watch from a skill perspective is their 4-star that they brought in Trey Thompson. I think he's a guy that can slide in as a stretch 4, and he looks at real upside as a scorer. I think he's going to be pretty impressive there. He can be a pick and pop guy. He's a guy that can attack a closeout, score at the rim, like 6'10" with a versatile skill set. So he's a guy to monitor. I know McCollum doesn't really like to use his bench, but if he's a guy that can emerge, I think this team has some real upside. And one final note is it's the team that's going to be great on the offensive glass, and they're going to get to the line. It's going to be kind of the same situation as it was at Drake last year. They really valued the extras. They were 31st nationally in offensive rebound rate, and you retain Manyao and Banks and Isaiah Howard on the wing had a 10% offensive rebound rate at just 6'5". Like he's a really good vertical athlete, so I think it does translate to an extent. Fulgaris was 9%. And like I mentioned, that McCollum teams value the extras, and I think this is probably going to be like their top statistical strength. So obviously you're going to see a super slow pace with this team, very methodical. It's not going to be super fun for some people to watch, but I think they are efficient in their own right.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think all that is true. I think especially like Fulgaris, I think he can be a really intriguing piece for this offense as something of a creator. And as like a pick and pop option, right? I mean, last year, 21.9% assist rate as like a big man in the Horizon League. So I think he can really help Bennett Sturts out in that area. Shifting to weaknesses now, I do think like that is an area that I'm a little bit concerned about. Obviously, like you mentioned, Ben McCollum doesn't really go to his bench at all. Bennett Sturts played 98.8% of minutes last year. So, he's not going to be off the floor much. But in the event that he does go to the bench, or he has to go to the bench, or like Bennett Sturts is, God forbid, like unavailable, he gets hurt or something, like I am a little bit concerned about, the on-ball guard depth. You look at a guy like Brendan Housen, who's, an off-ball movement shooter, career 6.2% assist rate. You've got guys like Banks and Manyao, who are offensive rebound guys. Cook, he's a 6'8", stretch four type. Same deal there. Fulgaris can be a creator in his own right, as I mentioned. Trey Thompson's a 4, but I just have some concerns, because I think there's a lot of like that 4-man type of player on this roster, right? Which is another concern I have on the offense. Like there's not a ton of like wing depth that can really like take people off the bounce. Like you have a bunch of guys that are really, just like going to be offensive rebounder, paint finishers, but there's not a ton of skill to create offense outside of like Bennett Sturts and Fulgaris. Housen isn't going to be getting a ton of his own shots. It's going to be Sturts or Fulgaris getting it for him. So I just have concerns there. And then the final note I had was the overall shooting depth, right? I mean, they're going to play Banks and Manyao a bunch. The other guys like Housen, Sturts, Fulgaris, they can all shoot it pretty well, obviously. But aside from them, even though, like you said, Ben McCollum doesn't go deep into his bench, like the overall shooting depth, I think, can be a little bit of an issue. Obviously, they're going to be really good on the offensive glass with this team, but I do think there are a few issues there with what they have.
For sure, yeah. Having that second creator is definitely the main weakness for this team. They don't really have one. I mean, they can't really sugarcoat it. They don't really have a guard that can do that. Like the guys that they're bringing off the bench are for ball handling depth, really. Like you have the guys like Cale Combs and Isaiah Howard, if you want to call him a great ball handler. I think that's really what those guys are going to be there for. They're there for outlets for when the Sturts ball screen doesn't go well, and then they can just kind of boomerang pass it back to him and they run another ball screen. That's kind of what we saw all year last year with that Drake offense. And the fact that it was efficient as it was, I think makes me believe that this is going to be a high floor offense, but that element definitely lowers the ceiling. Like it's not an offense that I expect to sit in the top 20 in adjusted offense all year. Like I do think they improved. Like I think the talent is definitely there, but ultimately that is their main issue. One other thing I will note, which I think it's kind of interesting, is like it's not a team that takes care of the ball, or it's a team that has a high turnover rate. I think that's how I'll view it. I don't think they're bad at taking care of the basketball. It's 265th nationally in turnover rate last season, but a lot of their turnovers came from shot clock violations, just from not being able to get a shot off. Like there were no like live ball turnovers with this group. It was a team that, either the shot clock ran out or, they threw it away out of bounds. They never really gave the ball away to the other team all that often. I think I saw a number where they led the league. They led the nation in shot clock violations by like 15 or something like that. So ultimately it's not like they can still control the pace, even though they're turning the ball over at times. And, that's kind of what we're going to see. We're probably going to see one of the slowest tempos in the nation, if not the slowest, but so not giving the ball away as in a live ball turnover fashion I just thought that was just kind of an interesting stat overall, as opposed to like a true weakness.
Yeah, no, that is interesting. Looking at the defensive side of the ball now, we saw Ben McCollum's team last year, 19th in the country in defensive rebound rate. Do you see that, as a strength here for this defense, and then other strengths along with that? What do you see?
Yeah, I just see them winning the shot volume battle, and it's going to be because of this side of the ball. They're going to defensive rebound, and they're going to turn you over at a high level. Like this is a defense that's going to play heavily in the gaps. They're going to look to force turnovers in that regard, and their front court players they're very good playmakers in their own right. But yeah, for winning the extras, they were 12th nationally in turnover rate, and like you mentioned, 19th nationally in defensive rebound rate, and they retained a lot of key pieces from that defense. In Cam Manyow, 24% defensive rebound rate, Banks had a 22%, and Alvaro Folgueras had a 27% defensive rebound rate. So I think he's going to fit in here just fine. And I mentioned there's plenty of defensive playmakers on this roster, and it kind of starts with their 5-man in Cam Manyow. He had a 4.8% steal rate. He's just a great anticipator of passes in the lane. His activity and effort are just off the charts, and it's just really something that you can't teach. I think he's a solid athlete, especially laterally for being a center. He's a little bit undersized, but his playmaking definitely makes up for it, and he's a good rebounder for his position. And Folgueras can do that as well. He's active in the lanes. He's a good playmaker in his own right. 4.2% block rate, 2.8% steal rate. And then one other guy that I think's probably a bit underrated on the defensive end is Tavion Banks. He had to play a lot of the backup 5 minutes last season, which led to like the Drake defense not having a great 2-point defense inside the arc. But now that they have Alvaro Folgueras to play the backup 5 minutes, I think Banks can kind of slide into his natural position at the 4. And I actually think he's a more valuable impact at the 3 than he is at the 5. And he didn't play anything at the 3. He was playing either the 4 or those backup 5 minutes. And, having Folgueras here now, I think is going to allow them to have more rim protection for all 40 minutes. And Banks can slide back to his natural position and be a good playmaker in that regard. And Bennett Sturts and Isaiah Howard are awesome defenders as well. I don't think people talk about Sturts and his ability to defend. I think he's one of the better guard defenders really in the country. And Isaiah Howard's not going to play a massive role, but when he's on the floor, like the defensive traits are going to pop. So yeah, I think this is a really good defense, and it's also going to be an elite transition defense. They were number 1 in the country last season in transition frequency allowed and 90th percentile defending it. So it's going to be a pretty elite team when it comes to controlling the pace as well.
Yeah, I mean, they should be really good on this end. As you said, they've got a lot of playmakers. Last year finished 12th in turnover rate at Drake. Really good on the defensive glass, as we said. Obviously, you mentioned last year 2-point defense was 307th in the country at Drake. It'll, I think, definitely be better than that this year with Folgueras. I still don't know if like the rim protection overall is like elite, right? I mean, a bunch of guys just kind of in that like 4% block rate, but they have a bunch of guys like you mentioned that really can anticipate passes well, create plays, turn them over. So I think like that's going to ultimately win out, but I don't think the defense I don't think the block or the rim protection upside is necessarily like top notch. But they'll still be really good on this end. One thing I had noted was just kind of like my concerns with the overall like wing guard defensive depth. They have a bunch of guys in that, as we talked about on the offensive end, that like 4-5 position. Maybe some of them can like slide up and guard threes. But overall, there's not a ton on the wing, right? We talked about Sturts. You talked about Hausen, not really a good defender. But like he's a guy along with Sturts that's going to play a lot of minutes, and behind them it's not necessarily fantastic. So I think like just lacking the wing and guard depth on the defensive end could certainly be a bit of an issue. I think it'll be fine just because of how great their playmakers are up front. But I think it's definitely something worth noting that could end up being a hindrance for this defense, especially against some of the top tier Big Ten or even at a national scale, the national teams that have guys on the wing, that are really strong go-to guys.
For sure. I would agree. And the depth is definitely a concern when McCollum, has to step up to the power conference ranks. Like he's been fairly vocal about not caring about if he has depth or not. But I think if you get into a situation where, your front court runs into a ton of foul trouble, which actually I think that's where they have the most depth is up front. You can go all the way down to Trey Thompson. You have 4 like pretty solid bigs that you can rotate if you really want to. I don't think McCollum does, but if he has to play those guys, he's obviously going to. And starts, if he doesn't have 5 fouls, he's probably not going to be off the floor. I wouldn't surprise me at all if he had 4 fouls early in the second half and they just run him out there anyway. It just doesn't matter, and he probably stays on the floor and wins him a game. It's just crazy how often he was out there. But yeah, the wing depth is obviously it's definitely a concern. I don't really see any of those guys down the board playing much of a role this season. So yeah, Hausen and Koch are going to have to step up for sure.
Yeah, I agree. Now looking at MVP X factor for this team, where'd you go?
It's Bennett starts for MVP for me. I think he's going to be one of the front runners for Conference Player of the Year as well. Obviously, there's one real front runner in Braden Smith, but I think starts would be in the next tier of guys. I just think the offensive load that he's going to take and just the added talent around him, I think is only going to open up his game a little bit more. So I could honestly see his efficiency going up from where it was last year at Drake, and just a great player across the board. And my X factor is I went with Alvaro Folgaris. I think he's going to have to be a real number 2 option for this team. If Iowa wants to gain any traction in this league, if they want to make the tournament, he's going to have to be a solid piece really on both ends of the floor. He's going to be a guy that brings them a rim protection element. And he's going to be on the offensive end, like I mentioned, like a very important pick and pop piece. And just in that 2-man game with starts, having an actual weapon is going to be very important for them. And it's just a matter of him actually performing at the power conference level now.
Yeah, I went the same direction and basically the same reasons. Bennett Sturts is going to be very high level, one of the best players, I think, in the Big Ten. Folgaris, I went with him as my X factor because I think he is going to have to be that second level creator for this team where they are lacking, another perimeter option. He's going to have a lot on his plate, and then as a pick and pop option, providing additional shooting for this offense. And then on the defensive end, taking some pressure off of, like you mentioned, Banks, so he doesn't have to play 5 minutes. It'll certainly be really important on the defensive end as well. So, it makes, to me, it was a pretty clear choice. Now, ceiling and floor for this team, where'd you go here?
Yeah, for my ceiling, I don't know if this is going to be higher than some consensus. I think they can finish 5th in the Big Ten, maybe even 4th. And I think they could be a 6th seed in the tournament. I don't think the ceiling's like super, super high, but I am very high on Ben McCollum and very high on some of the pieces on this roster. And, his coaching style with more talent is a pretty scary proposition, I think, for the rest of this league, especially over time. I think if he accumulates more talent, like this is going to be a team that could be a Big Ten champ within the next few years. He just wins everywhere he goes. I mean, he proved so many people wrong at Drake last year after he was at, it was Northwest Missouri State and D2, like just won every single year there as well. So yeah, I think they're going to continue to win, but I think their floor is like 10th or 11th in this league. I think the defense is a little bit too good to fail and to drop down the Big Ten ranks. And I think at their floor, I think they're a bubble team. Until I see McCollum teams start to lose, I mean, I'm not really going to believe it's going to happen.
Yeah, that's definitely fair with this roster. I think for me, I had them kind of in that 5 to 10 window. I think they can get up there, right in that middle of the top half, and then middle of the pack of the Big Ten at their floor. And like you said, I think we've talked about with a lot of teams being around that 10 seed is right on the bubble. I think as we'll talk about in our Big Ten awards show, we'll talk about how many teams get in, and I think it's right around that number. So that would put them right there. So for me, also bold prediction, I went with an Alvaro Folgaris stat. I went with averaging 4+ assists. I think just as that second primary creator, he averaged 3.2 last year. Obviously, Sturts is going to have the ball in his hands a lot, but I also think that Folgaris is going to have a lot on his plate as well, as that secondary primary creator. So I think 4, might be a little bit bold, but I think he could probably get there.
That's fair. Yeah, I think Sturts is going to need an outlet for some type of playmaking. I think these power conference teams aren't going to be stupid just to consistently just play drop coverage against him and allow him to get to the spots he wants to get to. Like some teams they're going to blitz him every single time he has the ball, and somebody else is going to have to be an outlet. And I think it could ultimately be Fulgaris, and it should be Fulgaris. But for my bold prediction, I said that Iowa will beat multiple elite Big Ten teams on the road this season. So I was just kind of looking at the schedule. I think I wouldn't be shocked if they went in and beat Purdue on the road. Like this is just a team that's kind of built to hang in tough games. Just the pace that they play at, the defense that they have it's just going to make them a very tough team to beat every single night. Like another one I had noted was this is a team that it's early conference play. They can beat Michigan State on the road. I think they can take away from a matchup perspective, they can take away their transition offense. And we've talked about the Michigan State half court offense quite a bit in the team preview. And I think that's kind of a good matchup for them. So I think it's a team that's going to be like a giant slayer in this league. Obviously their style is a bit susceptible to losing to inferior teams, but I think they can knock off any team in this league.
Yeah, it's interesting, especially, we saw what Ben McCollum has done, like you said, at every level. And then last year at Drake, there's a lot of upside to beat good teams. So we'll see what happens under Ben McCollum in his first year at Iowa, but we'll wrap things up here and we'll see you next time on the Mainly Hoops podcast.